everyone, welcome back to Gaming in the Keats. I'm your host Chris, and I am going over the Titans Winter Clash. It's a tournament review that happened about a month ago. If you want, you can watch rounds 1, 2, and 3. It is a one-day event that occurred at Titan Games and Hobbies in Timonium, Maryland. And so I took my Dread Elves. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over some tournament details. I'm going to take essentially a self-assessment of my experience at the tournament. I'm going to go over the list of what I brought, what units I enjoyed playing, what lessons I learned, where I can improve upon. I'm going to go over some of the unit performances and then go over like how I move forward to the next event. So appreciate y'all being here through this whole entertaining, hopefully if it was entertaining, experience, and just enjoying some pictures of battle reports. So anyways, let's get to it. All right, so this was an event hosted by Vamps in Maryland, aka my good friend James, and the person who basically, like, he was the first person I ever really played ninth age, and once 8th edition kind of exploded. So so he organized this event. It was a one day, so there's 3 games. No funky or customized rules here. We're just, game 1 is very straight, ancient fortifications, frontline clash for deployment and hold the center. Game 2 was the abandoned settlement map with spearhead deployment and breakthrough. And game 3 was the mountainous crags with a bottleneck deployment and spoils of war. So this self-assessment questionnaire that I've effectively have rated myself on my tournament experience, just to kind of help me move forward, just in terms of becoming a better player, a better sport, and just like enhancing my own tournament experience. So the first question is, did I know and feel comfortable with the core rule set? And I'm rating myself as a 2. This is on 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being like most confident here. So I gave myself a 2 for this. I really did not feel comfortable knowing the rule set going into the tournament. I really did not take the time necessary to prep for the event. And I think I do feel that I was indeed punished for it. So then the next question is, did I know what the primaries and the maps were ahead of time? So the tournament pack was released when lists were released, so that was 1 week prior to the event, and I gave myself a 2.5. So I really, when I built my list, I did not know any of the primaries were going to be, or what the maps were going to be. So it was definitely just going in let's just experiment and try some things out, and then going from there. And so I really also just, once that information was revealed, I did not take the time to really look over that information in detail and to know how I was going to go into each game. So then the next question is, did I know the rules of my list and my opponent's list? And I gave myself a 3.5 on that one. So for the most part, I felt very comfortable with the Sylvan Elf matchup as well as the Empire matchup. Like, I knew the rules that going into those matches. However, it was the Warriors of the Dark Gods where I think I neglected to really look into some of the changes that had occurred, and that even showed in my first battle report, whereas at the time of making that battle report, I saw, looking into the rule book, that, for example, the Chosen only had the 2 attacks and agility 5, and then only coming to learn after the fact that no, that's actually a typo. And so that's, again, it's just it can be difficult when there's so much information going around and so much like changing information, and knowing where to find it can be kind of, challenging, especially like I would not say I'm an active person on the forums. So like that's something I can of course improve upon, is just knowing my opponent's rule sets. I felt fairly comfortable with my own rule sets, but there were some certain details that came up even with my own list that I had to do some research in after the event in of itself. So yes, I think a 3.5 was fairly accurate. Then going into the hobby element of this review, was my army quote-unquote tabletop ready? Now this is of course like a completely relative, like all these questions I'm rating myself, right? And so these are all relative. But for me, tabletop ready is just like having the models at least with not just 3 colors on them, but having a wash and a basic form of highlighting, whether that be dry brushing or just like it can be easily and quick, it doesn't have to be an in-depth thing, but just having multiple color scheme, with some washes and dry brushing for highlights, and like completed bases as well. And so for me, I gave myself a 4.5. I had one model that I didn't get the base finished to, and like didn't have the full model to, and so I proxied like one of my old repeater batteries as the hunting chariot. So that's but now I've finally purchased the other hunting chariot, and like I've going through the process of getting it tabletop ready. But yeah, so I gave myself a 4.5 on that one, based upon my own standards. And then the next question is, did I have fun, and was I a good sport? And of course, again, these are relative questions, so I gave myself a 3 here. I certainly did have fun overall, but I definitely found myself during each game, just like I've definitely felt, I think, a bit anxious and stressed. In general, I do feel like I probably was letting some just other like life events kind of impact my gaming experience, and I have a feeling that it probably showed in to my opponents, just being honest. Like, if I'm like failing a dice roll and just kind of like, stating like, fuck, I failed that, and like showing my frustration. And I think there's a way to like do that effectively, but then to also do it in a way where it's just like, yeah, we roll dice, it's uncertain, and we get frustrated sometimes when things don't happen, but I think there's also a way to do that in which you can still have it be fun for you and your opponent, and I don't think I 100% achieved that. I think I probably was a bit more like animated than I should have been in my games for my own personal standard, and so I only rated myself a 3 on that one. But I still had fun with each opponent no matter what, and like laughs were had, and like it was an enjoyable experience overall. And then in terms of my goals that I set out for myself at the end, what were my goals? Were they realistic and achievable? And did I achieve them? So I set out 2 goals for myself. I set out a doable goal, which was just to average 10 points per game, and this is based upon my own previous tournament experience. And if I can, I think it's very doable for me to get, and to average the 10 points per game. And in this case, I did not achieve this goal. My average was actually only an 8.67. So I did not hit that one, which is definitely a bummer. I was hoping to do more there. And then I think the stretch goal for me, which was to get in the top 4 of the event. So the event was a total of 16 players, which did include the ringer here in that standing. And I made 10th place with 26 points, which definitely is a lot lower than I would have liked to have achieved. My last 2-day event in version 2.0, I think I got 4th or 5th place with like my with also like kind of a similar build, but then again, that's like a whole different point system, a whole different rule set, master of witchcraft, a whole bunch of stuff went into that one, and I was very happy with my performance in that 2-day event at Titan overall. So to really kind of fall back down, I was very not happy with that, but at the same time I also recognize that this goal in particular, to get in the top 4, is actually stretched because I'm also competing against I think some very high level players, at least in the mid-Atlantic for sure. So yeah, both goals were not achieved, so that certainly was a bummer, but this is how we review and assess and learn and hopefully move forward in our tournament experience, and that's what I achieved, and that's what I plan on doing. So now here is a breakdown of my list in terms of what units did I actually enjoyed playing, not based necessarily on their performance 100%, but really just like what I had fun playing on the battlefield, because that is to me like an incredibly important part of the gaming experience, and like why I play the Ninth Age as well. Like I enjoy playing this game, and I enjoy like the different units I'm putting on the field, and like having them look cool and rolling dice and having that narrative come into play here. So I basically just had 3 colors. Red was like not enjoyable, yellow was kind of in the middle, and then the green was like very enjoyable for me. And so the Dread Prince, she was a yellow. Like normally she's always up there as a green. Like normally she kicks ass, and my opponents just have a really hard time dealing with her, whether she be on a Manticore or on a Chariot. And unfortunately, she didn't perform very well this tournament. However, like I still enjoyed playing with her on the field. She still performed other kind of tertiary roles that still were very integral in like the battle plan in and of itself, and like my army. So I gave her a yellow. The Exarch, I think her magic, like for what my list does here, I think the magic setup was spot on. The only thing I kind of wished I had was like I wish I had my hereditary in addition to all the spells that I had access to here. Like that's the only like ask that I would have, is just like, man, if I could just have the hereditary on top of what I have here, like I feel completely set in my magic setup. I'm not investing too much points. I did give her Kingslayer for fun, which did come in handy a couple of times. I enjoyed using Kingslayer. It's like 40 points and the spear's cheap, which is great. And Simon Scales I thought was actually pretty necessary to have in this list. So I was pretty happy with her build overall, and I enjoyed using her on the field. Spears are kind of like a staple for me. In my lists, I usually field a big brick of them, just because like I do want some sort of real solid anvil. Sometimes I've used the spears in a more offensive role when they've been like when there were more synergies involved and like getting all those attacks, and this is in version 2.0, right, where you have like the Exarch buffing the unit, and they get they were like a little mini Death Star, but now they've been more of just like this really solid centerpiece unit. The sheltering standard, like I certainly relied a lot upon. However, I think moving forward, I'll probably switch that to a stalker standard, just given the terrain setup. The Corsairs I absolutely loved. Banner of Erlaine was cute, but I found that I wasn't charging with the Corsairs as much as I just was using them to kind of harass my opponent's smaller units, get in the way of the big, more important charges, and take out key points. But I absolutely love playing the Corsairs, especially with their stand and shoot rule now with the repeater handbows. Like that, they were awesome. I really did not enjoy the auxiliaries. Like, I had them in there as just like another sort of support slash anti-chaff unit and a scoring unit to help get primaries, but like I just didn't see them really fitting in this list at all, and I didn't enjoy playing them. Gorgons were great. I love them. They like at 450 points for 4, and halberds, like, holy crap, these guys will punch way above their weight class. They are a meaty unit. Like, yeah, they will probably die at some point, but like, it doesn't matter. They usually take out quite a lot, and they're a pain for, unless, of course, I run up into a list that has tools to deal with them. They can be a real challenge for my opponents to deal with. I absolutely love the Gorgons. The Obsidian Guard, 15 Obsidian Guard with the Banner of Our Lane, was also like interesting. I enjoyed having them there. But they got picked on a lot. Like, just the one unit of 15 definitely saw a lot of attention, especially now with the primary with Spoils of War, because they're one of my 2 most expensive scoring units. So like, it makes sense to go after them versus the spears. So I have certain thoughts about that unit, but overall, like, I did enjoy using them. Same with the Dread Acolytes. That unit does put out a lot of attacks with the Banner of Orlane, but only 6 of them, like, they get outground real quick if they bounce, and just get shot off the board or magicked off the board, like, with only 6 health points. So I'm kind of debating with that unit, but admittedly, it's still having that, like, one very mobile, fast unit to pressure my opponent's flanks, and to pressure like war machines or get into my opponent's backfield. Like, they were certainly like, my opponent can't just ignore them. The Divine Altar of Yema was fantastic. Having that +1 mobility within 12 inches was awesome. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed pushing up the field with that. The only issue I found with the Yema was more of the confusion of how to apply this Strider rule with certain charging units, and when it came into different situations, like overrunning overrunning and then failing the overrun, the question became, well, do I still get Strider if I'm overrun but I fail the overrun? Or if I'm pursuing a unit and I failed to catch him. That was the big sort of rules question I had, and had multiple conversations with one of the people who was helping create the rule set for the Altar of Yema, and how it interacted with like the changes to the new, rules for devastating charge, and that was certainly confusing. But overall, I still enjoyed. I prefer it over the other altars, and I think it does work with this list very nicely. The hunting chariots, they were interesting, and certainly, like, I used them more as support pieces, and I didn't really get to use them as like combo charging units, unfortunately, which I think I would have liked to have done more of. However, they were there to just, again, like, pick off like wounds on opponents' units, just be a bit more of a ranged threat, and ultimately kind of become chaff if need be. And the Mist Leviathan was absolutely great. Just having that, when you put it near the altar, having that March 16 fly monster was just fantastic. That was awesome. And just now, like, shoving that in my opponent's face and being like, here's 9 wounds that you just gotta have to, like, deal with, otherwise I'm gonna charge something nice. Like, that was great. So I really enjoyed using the Mist Leviathan. So yeah, that is sort of a breakdown of like how I color-coded my list, the units that I enjoyed, sort of medium enjoyed, and then didn't enjoy, and yeah. And then kind of moving forward, we can go into how each unit kind of performed. So yeah, so this is just a breakdown of points for units and kind of like the notes I took. Now, I do have to point out that I did not include the deficit of the unit if they gave up their points. Because for me, I just don't find that as helpful, just because I know, like, just seeing that point differential doesn't explain the whole picture of the unit's role on the battlefield. But I still find it fairly helpful to at least see, like, well, what points are these units accumulating, throughout each game. So yeah, the Dread Prince, unfortunately, she had a bit of a disappointing tournament. And honestly, like, it really did come down to, I think, just becoming very unlucky in certain key situations with her that, like, really cost her points. Game one, like, hitting the 3 6s on the, like, failing to catch the chosen unit, rolling 3 6s for her dangerous terrains, was just like a big, like, scary moment of, like, oh my god. Because it meant, yeah, that was just wild. And then, like, still failing to break it again, like, with one model left. That was just crazy. Like, she just had some pretty bad luck in that first game, and she was in the right target. Like, that going into that chosen unit was like her ideal target, with her multiple wounds 2, her impact hits, her resilience 5. They were only strength 4, AP 1 against her. They didn't have advantage position. Like, yeah, she was in the right target and just got unlucky here. In this one, she did a great job at zoning and providing that courage 10. Again, but that's the thing, like, her role is to provide not just that courage 10 bubble, but it's also a discipline bubble. So, like, I don't have to pay, well, I don't necessarily feel like I have to pay an extra 10 points for musicians, because most of the units are going to be in her courage, or her 18-inch bubble anyway, so they benefit from her disciplined rule. Whether or not they roll the actual check on 2 dice and make it is another question, but that's still like an extra roll that she provides. And so in this game, unfortunately, again, she just got a bit unlucky in not killing that Elk Lord, the Sylvan Elf Elk Lord, because, my opponent made their 6-up armors and then 5-up pages saves. Like, she did her job, but the opponent rolled well. And she broke the prince, but, broke the Sylvan Elf prince, but failed to catch him. So that was, unfortunately, again, she got kind of robbed there. And then in game 3, I failed my armor saves and my Aegis saves, and just from one shooting unit, and she was just immediately killed and didn't get to do anything that game, which was also, you could argue, that was like a deployment. That was in that game, absolutely, like, that was a deployment issue I had. So she ended up totaling about 1,040 points in the tournament. So, like, I had her at a yellow, just in this case, because, like, that yellow kind of offsets that deficit that she accrued from giving up her points and not getting them back, just because she plays, her role on the battlefield isn't just to get points and project a threat. Obviously, like, the Temple Exarch, the Spears, and the Divine Altar really do just, like, go together when I calculated their points. Unless it specifically pertained to, like, say in game 3, like, the Temple Exarch single-handedly just killed the Knight Commander, which was awesome. So, like, as a total, these 3 units, or these, like, 3 individual units that are combined, so we're looking at roughly 1,000 points, like, really hit, like, they were getting me the most points in this tournament. I would say they were, like, yeah, they really racked in a good amount of points, and they, like, helped me win my primaries, or win the primary and get the secondary as well. Here's what the cool thing. This to me was great. The Corsairs punched way above their weight class. Like, look at that, 1448. And now remember, I didn't state this earlier, but when I'm calculating these points, I'm only doing, did the unit get half points for the enemy unit, or did they get full points? So I'm not counting individual models that they killed. So it's either you got half points for it, or you helped get half points for the unit, or you helped get the full points, depending on what the combat situation was. So Corsairs, for example, in game 1, and I think I think I did misplay them in game 1. So they only got chip damage. In game 2, they took out, I think, 3 separate units, which was fantastic, like 898 points here. And in game 2, they also took out they took out 3 units before dying to the Imperial Guard. So they really did a fantastic job. And let's keep this in mind. The Banner of Verlaine never came into effect for them, because this is all points from shooting. Keep that in mind. The auxiliaries were just like chipping away, and they killed they did kill like 2 units in game 2, but they were super, super cheap. Like, they really just didn't do a good job. They didn't really help me score my secondaries, or help me win the primary at all. Which you could also argue that was just a misplay on my part too. Gorgons, I think, did a great job. Really, they shined in their game 2 against Sylvan Elves. I made a little note here in game 1, even though they only got 130 points, they were able to hold up like a Chosen Lord and an entire brick of warriors with a war dais in there with great weapons for like several rounds of combat. So they actually, like, if you were to calculate per model the points they got, this number would actually be a lot greater. So I think they actually did quite a good job here. The Obsidian card kind of they also had a bad tournament. They were able to take out 6 chosen models in their game 1, but then they just died. Game 2, they won me the primary, which was actually very important. They got me breakthrough. Again, the Obsidian Guard also provide that tertiary role of effectively like a BSB. They do project quite an interesting threat with the Banner of Verlaine, because I play them normally like 7 wide. So that will give me, assuming that they're all there, that will give me roughly like 28, possibly, no, it's 15, so I play them 8 wide. So yeah, that would give me 30 attacks if they charge with a full unit, which is pretty great. And yeah, game 3, they just had a bad matchup. They just got shot off the board in 1 turn. So it's just that kind of sucks for them. The Dread Acolytes, they really, they were kind of a question mark for me. They didn't really make up their points. They only picked up a couple of units here and there, and then kind of gave up their point. In this game, in Sylvan Elves, they didn't get me points, but they didn't give up their points either. So they just kind of were there. So you could argue that maybe I just could have played them better, or they just weren't pulling their weight. Oh yeah, this sucked. Oh man, they couldn't. Yeah, that was their whole. They just flubbed on their job of helping take out the Helmaw with the Mist Leviathan. Author of Yema, like I said, it did single-handedly take out one of the EOS. It took out the Prelate. The Altar of Yema killed the Prelate. So I did give it specifically those points. But of course, that's all tied into the spear points anyway. Keep that in mind. Then you have my supporting units of just chip damage and chaff, and just chipping away, because they ended up dying from shooting. And the Mist Leviathan, again, was more just a little bit of points here and there, chaff, and then it just died turn 1. So this was a breakdown of all the points I have here, and kind of going into the nitty-gritty explanations of what, how my units actually performed. Okay, so the top 3 units, this kind of a sum up of what you just saw here. The Spears Altar Exarch combo, they were just the MVP of the tournament for sure. They got me the most points. They helped me score primary. They helped me score my secondary. And yeah, they did a great job. They did give up their points in game 2, but I would have been curious to see how that was more of like I said, that was the gentleman's agreement, and I think I would really like to go back and actually roll that. Had we had time, I would have loved to have rolled out that combat, because I just want to see if the spears stick for one more round to allow for counter charges or not, and if they kill out like the huntsman units by themselves anyway. I would have been curious to see that. Corsairs were great. Yeah, they were like the second, and then the Gorgons were third. And like I said, we got to note the Chariot Prince's role. Even though, like I said, she didn't have a great tournament for what she can do, but she still played a very pivotal role in kind of keeping the army intact, keeping those courage checks in line, keeping those discipline checks in line, and projecting that threat. So she had a lot of soft power that I do want to at least put into like one of the units here that performed like, that helped make the army tick, so to speak. The bottom three, like auxiliaries, were like by far, they just sucked. I didn't use them well, and I didn't enjoy playing them, and I think that shows. Here, the acolytes really didn't perform as well as I thought they would. Like they can be quite a threat when they charge with a full unit, with all those attacks from the Banner of Erlaine, but they really just didn't. Yeah, I just couldn't find a way to get them into a good situation for them. And then the Miss Leviathan, like on a points-wise basis, it didn't bring in those points, but it was never supposed to, right? Like it was really just kind of like it provides that soft cover bubble for my infantry. I shove it into my opponent's face and just be like, deal with it. Like it's kind of like the big distraction Carnifex, if you will. But it's still like, in terms of an actual performance state, it still is in here. And then the hunting chariots, while they're doing chip damage, they never helped me get my secondary. Like they were never in a combined combat, except for like maybe one instance, and they ended up being not necessary for that combat anyway. So they really just kind of provided that chip damage, killing chosen models here and there, killing knights here and there. But they didn't really stopping the Swift Stride was, again, it's cute, it's matchup dependent, but, it helps. But yeah, they didn't really perform that well in the tournament just from a numbers perspective. So moving forward, I think the key things here is, first of all, I would say I'm definitely a casual player. I like to do the hobbying more so than the actual playing, and I really just don't have time to travel across the country and play in different tournaments, or travel the world and play in different tournaments, and I just don't have that much time to really invest. So what I can invest, so this is focusing on more of here's the time that I can at least spend more of doing, and really taking a study day, if even a weekend, and reactively reading and highlighting and really taking notes, going through the core rule book, especially once the rules freeze. That is very, very important. Really spending that time, because I've usually, my learning style has been more of a learning by doing, and what I've neglected in this new round of 3.0 is actually just sitting down and reading more of the actual just rule set as a whole, just reading the document fully. Also, my goal would be to get in one practice game a week in person. I don't like the online games. I'm sure they can be helpful. I don't doubt that at all. But that's just not the hobby and gaming experience that I want to get out of the Ninth Age. I would personally really like to just play in person as much as I can. So we'll go from there. Now, granted, that doesn't mean I'm not going to get in online games for practice, but my goal is to get in one practice game a week in person. Before the event, definitely actually go through each army list and really like print out the list and take notes on the army. I just neglected to do that this tournament, and I think I got punished for it. Also, once the tournament pack is released, do the same thing. Go through it, memorize it, and know it by heart. So when I get there, there's no questions, or I can answer them very confidently with my opponent of like, okay, what's our deployment? What's our primary? What does that mean? Like, how do we achieve it? Etc. Excuse me. And then going into the list design. So I don't want to, I don't really have a major issue with my list at all. I think, I think any list can be played well with like a high level of skill. So for me, it's just learning how to play my list better. But I do still have notes of like what I would, like tweaks I would do to change like kind of some things in the list that I might enjoy playing better, or that I want to at least try differently. In this case for me, I'd drop the auxiliaries and add in a second unit of Corsairs. I just really enjoyed playing the Corsairs, and I want to try 2 units now. Then that being said, that little detail, I'm thinking of doing like 2 units of 14, changing to the Banner of Speed and combining that with the Altar of Yema. So now all of a sudden those Corsairs are marching 14 inches and shooting 12. Like, that's awesome. I want to try that out. Or maybe do 3 units of 10. Maybe we don't need the Banner of Speed. Maybe I can just just get away with just the regular movement. So there's some things we can change here with the Corsairs, but ultimately I want 2 units. I just want to try that out. I think it's certainly worth trying out a different Dread Prince build. I didn't have any issues with the build. It's not as mobile for sure, but I'm not playing it on the flank. I'm playing it in the center to provide that 18-inch courage, so I don't need it to be as mobile. I think now it is an expensive chariot build, of course, and it is generally like a beat stick, like character killer build. But I think it's certainly worth exploring different builds for the Chariot Prince. I know in our meta, like alchemy's pretty big, so having that Basalt Infusion, for example, is like kind of key. Whatever build I have, if it's going to be a solo character, like on a Chariot or a Manticore, you're going to see Basalt Infusion, because I just need that extra like security in keeping the Chariot Prince alive. But ultimately, like, I think it's worth considering, maybe shave some points, and that might allow for example, in this next bullet point, I might want to consider a second unit of Obsidian Guard with the Banner of Verlaine in the list as well, if I can find points for it. Like, maybe that could be something with like the hunting chariots, if I drop them and put in the second unit of Obsidian Guard instead. So that could be something to consider. And then another thing that I could change out would be like maybe try black cloaks for the acolytes, because effectively they kind of serve a similar role at this rate, because black cloaks can scout in, they can vanguard, so you can make the argument that they could be actually not, I wouldn't say equally as mobile as the acolytes, but like they might be able to like at least kind of keep up with that sort of light troops fast unit. And now the black cloaks have a slightly different build. Like, they get devastating charge distracting. They're strength 4 with pair weapons, AP 1. So that's interesting. They get the hand bows. Of course, I definitely want hand bows. I want that stand and shoot option. Like, hand bows are great. The magic setup in my list supports the hand bows really well. So I think black cloaks are also worth investigating instead of acolytes. All right, and so some major lessons that I kind of came to after this event is just making sure that I like really take the time to have a better understanding of just how my particular army, like with the list that I play, how it plays the primary and the secondaries. Like, how do we now combine how do we now combine those two types of points in terms of just like utilizing the army, what are its strengths, what are its weaknesses? And so it's like taking more of a instead of it having it be guesswork, like really doing the research into thinking like, all right, well, in this matchup, like how does my list play against the primary versus like what my opponent does? And so that just really comes down to like doing the homework ahead of time. Then speaking of doing the homework ahead of time, like looking through the map pack and just saying like, let's, doesn't matter what, like, or I shouldn't say doesn't matter, but matchup aside, like how would I generally deploy my army on this map physically, knowing like, okay, where are my Stockard standards going? Where do I want my discipline or courage bubble? Like where do I generally want my units depending on what the primary is? So like, again, doing the homework ahead of time. Then another lesson I kind of learned here is like how I learned that, the Corsairs, for example, in the list, like just like really starting to understand what each unit's role is in my list. I think I felt overall I probably took maybe too many support units and perhaps not enough threat and not enough punch. So that's kind of the question I have in my mind when moving forward. But like, I think a great example of this is really, using the Corsairs to counter my opponent's light troops units and their chaffing units, because they just do that so effectively. So now I'm sitting there thinking like, well, aside from the auxiliaries being a scoring unit, like, do I really need them in the list? Where can I get that scoring elsewhere then, if I don't enjoy playing them and like the Corsairs just do their job better? Another sort of a core rules thing that I learned was, failing panic checks, actually the unit doesn't flee, it's now shaken. So that was kind of a big like, oh. And I realized like, quite frankly, I felt like our whole I wouldn't say the whole group, but I think a lot of us probably have been playing it that way. So that was kind of a big rules big change to that, because as you saw, like the Corsairs certainly panicked some units, and both myself and the opponent like just made the assumption that, oh, the unit panics and it breaks and it runs, right? Like we just didn't even consider it being an option that wouldn't happen, which goes sort of into the deeper lesson of like just doing your homework. So really that's what this should be called, major lessons, doing your homework. And then let's see, oh yeah, like another rule lesson learned here from at least feedback that I've gotten from this event was just like, when you fail the charge, you're no longer considered shaken, and so that means your wizards can still cast magic. Now, I'm still in the process of researching this fact upon recording this, but like to just confirm that is indeed the case, again, goes back in the whole doing your homework. But, that was a big change that affected both my and my opponent's decisions in terms of trying to make a charge in the first place with a wizard in the unit that's charging. So that's pretty interesting. And then the Altar of Yema, that was certainly, it's still been kind of confusing in terms of when the Strider is applied. And so, learning that, okay, well, if I break a unit and fail to catch him, I still need to take dangerous terrains because I'm not technically considered charging. Like, the unit gains devastating charge Strider, but you don't get the bonus. Yeah, it's like a whole fucking thing, right? So I would argue that would be my feedback to people designing that that needs to be like I don't know what the intention is here, but I would argue just make the effect last for the turn. Like the unit has Strider for the rest of the turn as long as it has declared a charge, right? So like that just makes it clear. It lasts. There's like, it's not situational, but that was certainly like a lesson that like was very. I had to do quite a bit of like just digging for that specific rule. So that was, yeah. Anyway, point being, I'd say just like kind of streamline that particular rule, because there's all these different instances surrounding the concept, surrounding like charging, pursuing, overrunning, when should Strider be applied, what is the intent of the rule versus like what people want. If they just, yeah, I don't know. That's up to the people who designed it. So, oh my goodness, wow. Thank you all so much for listening to me talk at this rate. 45 minutes going on 46 of me going over this tournament review, which is really it's just my performance at this rate. Like, I'm going over all these different things that I learned, going over, like, just having a lot of fun, like, rating and assessing myself, assessing the list, assessing the units performed, lessons, etc., moving forward, So the fact that you've made it this far, like, you're awesome. You are amazing. So by all means, if you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe. I'm throwing in that shameless plug right there. But this is great. Like, doing this sort of analysis, I felt, has been like really enlightening in terms of how I can approach my next tournament event, or at least like attempt to, just to enhance my own playing, to just get better, to learn more, and to just love my army more, love the Dread Elves more, because I love this army, and this army I've had a lot of burnout from it, I've had a lot of frustration from it, and this is, for me, it's a very challenging army to play that I've been playing with since like 7th edition, Warhammer Fantasy. But yeah, but it's been a really wonderful and enjoyable process. So thank y'all for just giving your feedback, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao for now, y'all.